How does the government know how many people there are living in each town, city and village in Britain? And how do they plan nationwide services like the rail and road networks? How does local government discover what sorts of people live in their local area? And how do they plan services for those people, like new roads, new houses and new schools? How do retailers decide where to build new shops to attract the greatest number of customers? And how do they decide which products to stock on their shelves?
Having trouble with her arthritis again?
No, she'd had her census form delivered.
Oh, isn't it fascinating? A true picture of British life.
Oh, it's a blooming cheek, if you ask me.
Here, today is Census Day, when 23 million householders are expected to fill in their government census forms. People who refuse to complete the questionnaires could face a £400 fine.
All householders should this evening be filling in the census forms delivered over the past week. The forms ask for details on things like the number of rooms in your house.
On Sunday, the 21st of April, 1991, the people of Britain took part in the 19th full census of the population. Every household in England, Wales and Scotland was asked to fill in a government census form, which asked questions about age, housing, occupation and health. The answers to these questions are used to compile statistics that give a detailed picture about the country's population. These statistics are used by many organizations to help them plan for the future. Central government, local authorities, health authorities, and private businesses will all use census statistics. But the British census isn't a new idea. The first official census in England and Wales was held on the 10th of March, 1801. The first census aimed to provide an accurate head count of Britain's population. It disclosed a population figure of just under 11 million. A census has been held every 10 years since then, apart from in 1941 during the Second World War. When this program was made, only preliminary figures were available for the 1991 census. They indicated a population of 53,925,000, but that figure was expected to be revised. The census provides for more than a simple head count of population. That's why the questions on the census form are so detailed. The questions about relationships in households provide information about the size of families and how many single-parent families there are. The questions on type of accommodation provide information about the amount and type of housing in each local area. And the various questions on employment, occupation and workplace provide basic information on the workforce and the spread of employment. Finally, the questions about car ownership and means of travel to work provide information about road users and are used by all those concerned with traffic problems. Although the census form asks for names, these are only used for checking and are not entered for census processing. Everybody is required by law to fill in a census form, but they're also protected by the law. The Census Office is bound to make sure that information given on the form remains secret and safe. To do that, the completed forms are kept confidential for 100 years. The 1991 census is the biggest single data processing operation Britain has ever seen, costing £135 million over 10 years. This enormous cost explains why the census is not held more often. Every household in the land must be contacted. That's over 23 million homes, and everybody must be accounted for.
Did you have any problems with it?
No, not really, but my son helped me with it.
Did he? Oh, that was nice of him.
The first task is to divide the country into over 100,000 areas, known as enumeration districts, or EDs. Each ED contains an average of about 200 households. Rural areas are likely to have less, urban areas more. These enumeration districts are the key to the census. They're the smallest areas for which statistics are made available. They're large enough to protect the identity of individual households, but small enough to provide an extremely detailed local picture of the population. And enumeration districts are drawn up for the whole of England, Wales and Scotland, so the census gives detailed statistics for the whole of Britain. The census forms are delivered and collected by a team of 130,000 temporary staff, known as enumerators. They're given special instructions about confidentiality and how to deal with unusual types of homes. Leaflets are produced in 19 languages to help people understand the forms. The census form itself is printed in English and Welsh.
Hello, I've come to collect your census form.
Yes, I saw you coming from upstairs.
Thank you very much.
When collecting the forms, enumerators will check that all the questions have been completed and help people who have difficulty filling in the forms. Then the material is taken to the census processing offices in Glasgow and Hampshire. There the massive task of producing census statistics begins. The forms themselves need 12 miles of racking to store them, and the data extracted is expected to occupy some 65,000 megabytes of online storage. Once processed, the data will be used to produce over 3,000 tables of national and local statistics. Although basic counts were available 2 months after the census was taken, it'll be the end of 1993 before all the detailed results are published.
The census. It counts because you count.
The statistics produced by the census are used by many people in many different ways. Central government uses population counts to work out how much money to grant each local authority. In turn, these authorities use census information when planning services within their areas.
Good afternoon, Research Library. Can I help you?
In Greater London, census data processing is coordinated by the London Research Centre, which is responsible for purchasing the census data from the government and then supplying it to each of the 33 local boroughs. The Research Centre provides London-wide statistical information on population, housing, transportation and employment.
The biggest strength of the census is that the information has to be provided by everybody. So it therefore is the only source of information that is accurate down to very small areas. And the sort of area we're talking about is an enumeration district. There are no other sources that will provide accurate information down to that sort of level.
The Research Centre works with the London boroughs to advise them how they can best use census data.
The London boroughs will come to us with questions on things like the demographic makeup of their population, the age structures, the number of elderly or the proportion of elderly and children. They also are very interested in the ethnic makeup of their population.
Although the Research Centre can commission special tables of census data, there are some questions that can't be answered immediately.
When a borough comes to us with a question that isn't easily answered from the census, we will have to advise them on whether there is anything that approaches the information they want. Say if they ask us about income from the census. A question on income has never been included, so we would advise them on anything that may be used as a proxy. Say car ownership is sometimes used as a proxy for income.
But how can the London boroughs make sense of the great mass of census data available to them?
The changes in computer power over the last 10 years or the last few years have meant that it is possible for a user of census statistics anywhere, but in particular in the London boroughs that we deal with, to handle much larger volumes of data than they've ever been able to before on their own personal computers. We have commissioned a firm to digitise all the enumeration districts that were used in the 1991 census, which can then be read into a mapping package, along with some census data or other data for the corresponding areas, and so a map will be produced automatically. The mapping packages that are used now are very important in presentation of data because they make a large volume of statistics very easy to understand.
One of the most established users of the census in London is the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea. Situated in West London, the borough is home to 126,000 people.
If we had to commission our own surveys to replicate census data, it would be very, very expensive for us. We wouldn't get the coverage, and we would have to commission a new survey on every topic. So the census provides a very good deal for us because it provides information across the board at a very small area level.
Although it's one of the smaller London boroughs, Kensington and Chelsea is an extremely varied area. In the south, down by the river, Chelsea is an area of small-scale dwellings. The central part of the borough, around Kensington and Knightsbridge, is a very prosperous area with extremely high-class homes. To the west, Earl's Court is a district containing mostly hotels and bedsit accommodation. The population here is changing rapidly as people move in and out of accommodation. The north of the borough is less well off. There's a predominance of high-density residential developments.
The census helps us to plan for the entire borough, not just the underprivileged areas. We do need to know the population mix and the type of people we've got, the type of housing stock across the whole of the borough. We do need to know where people work who live in the borough, across the whole borough. So it provides a snapshot of living conditions and circumstances in the borough at a particular point in time.
The borough can use census data to target particular areas that may require special services, such as Meals on Wheels for ethnic groups. The services Kensington and Chelsea provide are intended for all the people living and working in the borough. The census gives them basic information about the population to help them plan these services.
The greatest weakness of the census is that it doesn't come out often enough. It only comes out every 10 years. At the moment we're hanging fire on the 1991 census, which I'm sure will change our views about certain parts of the borough, because a lot can happen in 10 years. So if I could wave a magic wand, I'd like to see a census every 5 years, say.
The census. It counts because you count.
It's not just the public sector that relies on the census so much. Private industries also rely on census statistics to help them plan the future of their businesses. The London consultancy firm, CACI, was the first company to be granted a license by the government to supply census data to the private sector. CACI advises many private companies on how census data can help them plan effectively for the future expansion of their businesses.
CACI acts as an interface between our customer, their needs, their key issues, and the census data. And we obviously need to have a thorough understanding of all of the data items available to us, all of the third-party data items that we can bring in, and we need to understand our clients' issues, and quite often we need to help them to identify them in terms that can then be related back to the census.
The most common task CACI undertakes is to help business clients with the siting of new shops and offices.
If a client comes to us and needs help in siting their new store, the first thing that we do is sit down and talk to them to identify their key issues and identify what makes their operation different to other people's, so that we can identify exactly which factors we need to go and look for in target patches of turf so that they can see whether a new site is viable. So, for example, if a new store needs to be evaluated and they have several patches of turf, we would draw off the census information for each of the enumeration districts within their catchment areas and find out how much of their specific target people are within each of the catchment areas. One of the tools of the trade that CACI uses and is able to provide to our customers in-house is the Insight system. This is a PC, a geographical information system, which effectively provides a great big geographical spreadsheet with a nice mapping on the front, so that answers to questions not only come out as spreadsheets, but also come out as shaded maps. A map is an easier way of understanding columns of data. What we can provide to our clients is for each enumeration district a whole series of data items, and then they can manipulate those to draw off the information in-house to allow them to evaluate catchment areas.
But even with all the new technology available, census analysis is never a straightforward task.
CACI spends a lot of time working with clients, helping them to identify who the target customer is and where they come from. Now, this is not an easy process. It's quite time-consuming. To collect enough information about people so that you can classify them and then link in with census data takes a lot of time and commitment on customers' parts. Sometimes they don't realise why the effort is necessary. But without knowing accurately who the target customer is and what distance they're being drawn from, any evaluation that follows on from that is only as good as the initial supposition. It's not just census data that CACI uses to help our customers. We use third-party data sources like large market research questionnaires that ask information about purchasing habits. We also use a lot of our in-house expertise, and that, in combination with the client's knowledge of their own markets, is a very strong combination indeed, and that's what makes for success.
One of CACI's clients is the supermarket chain Asda. Asda pioneered the move to large edge-of-town superstores with extensive parking and a wide range of services. Asda is one of the UK's largest food retailers, with 204 stores nationwide and an annual turnover of £4.3 billion. At Asda's headquarters in Leeds, the Strategic Planning Department has the responsibility of developing new sites for the Asda chain.
The first stage is to create a development plan, and by that I mean to identify at very local levels in some cases where we can site new stores. Now that includes defending existing stores in terms of going in with a new store to actually stop a competitor coming in, or going into fresh sites, fresh areas where competition is weak.
The building of a new superstore is a major undertaking and a substantial long-term investment. On average, it costs Asda about £16 million just to buy a site and construct the new store. Once the store has opened, it'll take about 3 years to get to maturity. That's when the number of customers has risen to the expected maximum. The store will stay open for many years and will have to remain profitable as the population changes in the surrounding area. When we made this programme, Asda was nearing completion of a new store in Rotherham to replace an existing one nearby.
We felt that the best thing we could do was to re-site the store to a better location with better access and better visibility, where we could put in the range of products which we would like to put into that store, which we were unable to do in the existing older store.
The first task in evaluating a new site is to determine the exact catchment area by mapping out 5, 10 and 15-minute drive time bands around the store. Asda knows from past surveys that 95% of the store's customers will come from this area. The next stage is to use census data to divide these drive time bands into zones, depending on the population and type of housing. Each zone in the store's catchment area will have very different characteristics, and different sorts of people will live there. Census statistics are then used to determine how many potential customers there are in each of these zones.
We look for several features within the population. Obviously, car ownership is an important one, bearing in mind that most of our locations tend to be on the edge of town. and we have large car parks, which obviously is a factor which would influence people coming to us. The other is disposable income, or some form of measure of disposable income. It's not just census data we use. We also use our own data, and we use additional data from, in some cases, government statistics on family expenditure, for instance. And we combine them and compare them to actually understand what the likely effects will be of having a new superstore, particularly an Asda superstore, in that location.
But Asda doesn't just use census statistics to help with the siting of new stores. The same information that they've derived from the census can also be used to decide exactly what products to stock in the new store, a process known as ranging.
Each store is assessed separately in terms of its ranging requirements. The first cut, if you like, in terms of merchandising, is its regional characteristics. For instance, if it's in Scotland, it would have a different range in certain product areas than it would in, say, in the south of England. Then there are demographic features that need to be taken into account. Each store obviously has a different makeup in terms of its catchment, in terms of its population. And those characteristics determine, to a large extent, what products are likely to sell and which ones are not.
The census. It counts because you count.
Hello. May I ask you a few questions?
The census is vital in the way we advise London boroughs to plan their services.
When was I born? Where will I go to school?
It isn't an understatement to say that the census is an invaluable and irreplaceable source of information, enabling us to plan our service provision. It doesn't provide all the answers. There are other factors that have to be taken into account, but we just couldn't plan ahead without it.
Where will I work? How will I get there?
For us, the census data is the start point of the evaluations in answering who's the target customer, where do they come from, and where can I find more of them profitably.
What kind of house will I live in?
Census data is absolutely essential to not just Asda, but any retailer who is trying to scientifically calculate what the potential is at a particular location.
Will I have children? When will they be born?